History remembers the famous battles, the Alamo, Little Bighorn, clashes so large they shaped the map itself, quick, dramatic cuts of iconic battle paintings, then a sudden shift to a close-up of a broken treaty document or a lone Comanche arrow in the dust. But history is built on fractures, on moments of shattered trust so profound they don't just start a fight. They ignite a war of vengeance. The music dips, leaving only the sound of wind. A portrait of Buffalo Hump fades in, his gaze intense and unwavering. This is the story of one of those fractures. It wasn't just a broken promise. It was a massacre disguised as a peace talk, the Council House fight. An act of betrayal so stark, it demanded a response written not in words, but in fire and blood. Music begins to build, subtly incorporating a relentless rhythmic beat like distant hoofbeats, shots of a massive Comanche war party materializing from the heat haze on the plains. And the man who would answer that betrayal was the formidable Pinateca war chief, Buffalo Hump. His response would be swift, brutal, and on a scale the American frontier would never see again. This is the story of a meticulously planned revenge, a raid deeper into settled territory than any before it, targeting the very heart of the fledgling Republic of Texas. Fast-paced cuts, warriors riding at full gallop the burning town of Linville, terrified settlers fleeing to boats, the chaotic battle at Plum Creek. The music swells to a crescendo. We will follow the trail of vengeance from a bloody council room in San Antonio to the smoking ruins of coastal towns to the final running fight that would decide the cost of a great betrayal. This is the untold story of the largest Native American raid in U.S. history. Final shot holds on the determined face of Buffalo Hump. The music cuts sharply, leaving a moment of silence. Narrator, a whisper full of intent. This is Buffalo Hump's War of Vengeance. But before begin, do well to like and subscribe. Violence, hostilities, and deep animosity among different foreign powers, Native American tribes, and westward migrants flared along the western frontier, giving rise to organized military engagements between the opposing forces. Among the most well-known wars and their constituent battles were those fought in the American West, including the Texas Revolution, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and Red Cloud's War, to cite several examples. Yet, behind these large-scale clashes and blood-soaked fields, existed far more minor confrontations that find no place in contemporary educational texts. The reality is that there existed such a multitude of small-scale wars and unresolved hostilities that documenting every single frontier conflict would require many thousands of written pages. Therefore, to bring clarity to these lesser clashes and reveal the intriguing occurrences that precipitated such turmoil, this is the initial installment of a series examining Wild West battles that are likely unfamiliar to you. The origins of the Great Raid of 1840 are embedded more profoundly within the history of Texas and its dealings with the Native American Comanche Nation. The spark for this confrontation ignited early in that same year, on March 19, 1840, in a battle that was itself exceptionally violent. This event is known to historians as the Council House fight. On that day, 33 chiefs from various Comanche bands came to San Antonio, then part of the Republic of Texas, which was not yet a state within the United States. The Republic of Texas had organized a peace council with these 33 leaders, proposing an exchange of white captives for a cessation of fighting between colonists and Native American. While the Comanche chiefs brought with them just one captive, who happened to be a 16-year-old girl named Matilda Lockhart, the Republic of Texas failed to deliver its promised part of the agreement. This was despite the chiefs explaining that the other captives were with different Comanche bands and would be released only after further negotiations were secured. Rather than persisting with the Peace Council or initiating more trade discussions, Texan authorities detained all 33 chiefs, along with 32 of their accompanying family members, imprisoning them without warning. Naturally, the Comanche representatives resisted this, trying to reason and physically oppose the Texans. By then, however, it was already futile. When one of the Comanche men shot an arrow at a Texan who had his weapon ready, complete pandemonium ensued. When the fighting concluded, 35 Comanche individuals were dead, including 2 women and 3 children. Only 7 Texans lost their lives, and they took the remaining 29 Comanche people as prisoners. The next day, one Comanche woman was sent back to her tribe's encampment to deliver the terms. The other prisoners would be released only when the Texan captives were freed. Her report also contained news of the Council House fight and the deaths of the 35 Comanche, exposing the betrayal committed by the Republic of Texas. Consequently, warriors returned to San Antonio intending to retaliate, but the Texans refused to engage, requesting the Comanches honor a 12-day truce they had just proclaimed. The Comanches, fearing another imminent betrayal, ignored this truce entirely. Enraged and bitter that their side of the peace agreement had been intentionally disregarded, they killed the remaining 16 Texan hostages they held. They believed the Texans must not be allowed to escape the consequences of such treachery. In time, news of the Council House fight and the Republic of Texas's brutal actions reached Buffalo Hump, the primary war chief of the Pennateca Band of Comanche. Like many in his nation, Buffalo Hump viewed the event as a profound act of betrayal and the final limit of his tribe's patience with Texan authorities. Over the subsequent months, he journeyed across much of the southern Comanche territory, visiting other Pennateca camps. There, he conferred with the second and third war chiefs, Yellow Wolf and Santa Anna. Collectively, the 3 leaders determined the most fitting response was to exact vengeance upon the Republic of Texas and those who had scorned the Comanche people. Buffalo Hump personally proposed assembling a large raiding party to attack Texan settlements between San Antonio and Bastrop, intent on making their fury and grievance known to all who had harmed them. By July 1840, plans for the raiding party were nearly complete. They had gathered over 400 warriors pledged to the raids, plus an additional 500 women and boys to manage the mobile camps and perform tasks normally done by the men. Furthermore, the war chief's force was varied, incorporating many members from different Comanche divisions, alongside the diverse bands and family groups represented by the fighters. Setting out from the plains of West Texas, Buffalo Hump and his group rode toward the eastern part of what would become the Lone Star State, where populated towns lay unaware, oblivious to the danger approaching. After several weeks traveling into central Texas, the Comanche raiding party under Buffalo Hump, Yellow Wolf, and Santa Anna reached the vicinity of Victoria, Texas on August 6, 1840. At that time, Victoria was scarcely 20 years old, having been established in 1824 and named for the first president of the Republic of Mexico. Only a few hundred residents lived in Victoria then, and none anticipated any assault as the summer's hottest period set in. Sadly for Victoria's citizens, their lack of alertness was, until then, reasonable. A few days prior to the Comanche arrival, several scouts from the Texas Rangers, who had been surveying central Texas, became aware of an exceptionally large war party moving across the open plains, its trajectory aimed directly at the smaller communities of West Texas. Consequently, these Rangers delayed for a day or two before beginning to trail the Comanche raiders, ensuring they remained undetected and safeguarding the unsuspecting populace as long as possible. What the Rangers failed to anticipate was the division of the raiding party into two segments. The first group stayed at the main camp with the women and children, while the second, larger contingent, consisting solely of several hundred mounted warriors, rode directly toward Victoria. At that juncture, the Rangers had not yet reached the town to alert its inhabitants to the Comanche threat, leaving them exposed. On the night of August 6th, this vulnerability was fully exploited by the warriors. Minutes after the Comanche entered Victoria, chaos erupted throughout its streets. Most citizens secured themselves inside their homes or businesses, barricading doors against violent intrusion. Ultimately, not all of Victoria's residents escaped harm at the hands of the Comanche. 12 individuals were killed before a volley of rifle and gunfire began to pour down upon the raiders. When the warriors realized the shots originated from the upper floors of buildings, they gathered their remaining force and withdrew from the town as swiftly as they had arrived. In the wake of the attack, the settlement of Victoria, Texas, was largely spared severe structural damage. The Comanches had initially intended to target only coastal settlements where it was easier to plunder horses and valuables in areas less fortified than those in central Texas. The raid on Victoria proved as lethal as it did solely because it was a surprise assault by a segment of the full Comanche force. Had the Texas Rangers arrived in time to warn the townspeople, or had the Comanches adhered to their original plan, the outcome would have been significantly different. Nonetheless, the Comanches proceeded southeast undeterred, redirecting their focus to coastal settlements along what became known as the Great Raid. On the night of August 6th, Buffalo Hump and his warriors camped at Spring Creek, their next target, the nearby town of Linville, now within reach. The next morning, August 7th, 1840, Buffalo Hump led the group to Placido Creek near present-day Placido, Texas, where they established another camp. This site was a secluded portion of a ranch formerly owned by Placido Benavides. They were now just 12 miles from Linville, and with no rangers to forewarn them of the impending danger, the townsfolk remained completely unaware. In the early hours of August 8th, the Comanches encircled Linville, ensuring no escape before launching their assault. Although Linville was the second largest port in Texas, its stature offered no protection against Buffalo Hump and his enraged followers. Once the encirclement was complete, the raid commenced. The Comanches began by plundering several stores before advancing to private homes where residents scrambled to flee, often unsuccessfully. As the pillaging continued, a number of Linville's citizens convened to devise a defensive plan. Knowing they lacked the strength or firepower for direct confrontation, they understood their sole hope for survival was to endure until the Comanches departed, preoccupied with looting. One citizen proposed moving the populace into the coastal waters, where several boats and a large schooner were engaged in the day's fishing. This plan was formed upon the realization that the Comanche, as Plains Indians, had little experience with combat in deep water. After agreeing that a rendezvous on the water was their only option, the remaining population was assembled and placed onto the various vessels in the bay. William G. Marshall, captain of the mid-sized schooner, also opened his anchored ship to the refugees. It sat in water deep enough to be inaccessible to the Comanche. Once everyone had reached the boats, the people of Linville could only watch as the raiders burned their settlement. Between acts of plunder, some warriors emerged from homes wearing settlers' linens and top hats, while others tied fine fabrics and bedding to their horses, dragging the finery through the mud. Remarkably, Linville suffered only 3 casualties amid the devastation. One victim was the local customs officer, Hugh Watts. Watts had been escorted to the bay but returned at the last moment to retrieve a valuable heirloom left behind. As he seized a gold watch from his bedroom, he was killed by the Comanche, who also captured his new wife. The death toll nearly reached 4, as Judge John Hayes of Linville placed himself directly in harm's way that afternoon. Unable to bear watching his town burn, he armed himself with a pistol, ran toward the shoreline, and began shouting at the Comanche warriors guarding the beach. Legend holds that the judge was spared only because his behavior was so outlandish and frantic that the Comanche believed him insane, allowing him to live out of pity. This mercy proved fortuitous, as the pistol Judge Hayes carried contained no ammunition. By late afternoon, the raiders had finished looting and collected everything they did not burn or destroy. Approximately $300,000 worth of trade goods from New Orleans bound for Austin were either stolen or ruined, and most of Linville's commercial district was razed. Within hours, the Comanche departed the scene, riding away as the former residents looked upon their livelihoods reduced to smoldering ruins. The damage was so extensive that the town never recovered. Its displaced citizens eventually resettled elsewhere along the Texas coast, primarily in Port Lavaca. In the 3 days following the sack of Linville, the Comanche raiding party camped to regroup and manage the immense quantity of plunder and supplies acquired from the 2 raids. Their most significant challenge arose from the captured mules, slower animals that compelled the Comanche to alter their tactics. Typically, they would retreat from a battlefield or raid at full speed on horseback, simply outrunning any pursuit. Now burdened by hundreds of laden mules carrying heavy goods, such a rapid escape was impossible, forcing a more deliberate and measured pace. This did not, however, deter Buffalo Hump and his party from advancing. Despite their slowed progress, they remained resolved to continue avenging the betrayal by Texan officials in San Antonio. Fortunately for the Republic of Texas, the Comanches' reduced speed worked to the advantage of the pursuing Rangers. Even after the destruction of Linville, the Rangers still could not directly engage the Comanche due to the raiders' considerable numbers. This did not mean the Rangers were idle. Riding urgently, they began organizing a more formal response. In the hours after Linville's fall, every ranger company in eastern and central Texas was summoned at the request of Matthew Caldwell and Ed Burleson. They were joined by countless volunteers and former soldiers, all armed and eager to strike back against the Comanche and halt the raids. This newly assembled force of rangers and militiamen tracked the Comanche until contact was finally made on August 12th. The first shot was fired on the Texas plains near the banks of Plum Creek, approximately 25 miles south of Austin, close to present-day Lockhart. Almost instantly, the engagement devolved into a chaotic running battle. The Comanche, already concerned their pack mules posed a liability, saw the Rangers' arrival as confirmation. They consequently pivoted southwest, attempting to flee toward the Llano Estacado and the safety of Comancheria. In doing so, they abandoned most of their pack mules, along with large quantities of dried goods that could not be saved. The party also discarded bulky items like mirrors and non-essential supplies such as liquor. After the fighting subsided, the Rangers recovered over 100 horses and mules, plus an undisclosed amount of silver bullion originally plundered from Linville. In the aftermath, the Republic of Texas claimed to have killed 87 raiders, though only 12 bodies were found. The rest were likely carried back to Comancheria by Buffalo Hump's group. The Rangers lost only 11 men, despite being outnumbered by at least 200. When the Comanche returned to their territory, they had successfully seized over $500,000 worth of supplies and livestock from the Texans. Yet they understood such a large-scale strike could not be repeated. The betrayal by the Republic still rankled, but any further retaliation would have to wait until the dust settled from Plum Creek. Despite the scale of the Comanche haul, the Texas Rangers abandoned their pursuit. Reports suggest their primary concern was the stolen silver bullion, and they concentrated on restoring a portion of it to the raid's victims and rightful owners. In the years following the Great Raid of 1840, Buffalo Hump and his followers continued to raid white settlements until approximately 1856. The 1840 raid itself would be recorded as the largest undertaken by any Native American tribe against white settlers in United States history. It stands as one of the few conflicts that ended in a decisive indigenous victory and serves as a potent symbol of the fraught relationship between Comancheria and the Republic of Texas in the mid-19th century. The scene fades from the final panoramic shot of the Texas plains back to a more intimate, thoughtful setting, perhaps a dimly lit study with a vintage map or the quiet, windswept prairie at dusk. The music transitions to something reflective, poignant, and slightly mysterious, a single, mournful flute melody over a soft, ambient drone. Voice is softer now, introspective but still resonant. And so the dust settled on Plum Creek. The Comanche, with their hard-won plunder, vanished back into the vastness of Comancheria. The Rangers, having recovered their silver, turned for home. The Great Raid was over. Slow, evocative shots, a single, weathered journal, a tattered piece of fine cloth caught on a thorn bush. The silent, grassy field where the council house once stood. But to call this an ending is to misunderstand the frontier. Buffalo Hump had made his point with terrifying clarity. Vengeance had been exacted, a message written in the ashes of Linville and the chaos of Victoria. Yet the betrayal at the council house was a wound that would not close. The music becomes even more sparse, leaving space for the weight of the words. The visual focus is on the stark, opposing philosophies. This was never a war for territory, not really. It was a war of principle. For the Comanche, it was about honor, retribution, and the catastrophic price of broken faith. For the Republic of Texas, it was about sovereignty, expansion, and survival by any means necessary. Two worlds colliding with a force that could only end in one consuming the other. A powerful, poignant montage, a close-up of a Comanche warrior's eyes from a period photograph, then a Texan settler's determined gaze, the image of a child's toy half buried in ashes, the lonely, enduring landscape. The Great Raid of 1840 stands as a brutal monument to that collision, the largest of its kind in American history, not for the land it captured, but for the sheer, uncompromising statement it made. The narrator's voice drops to a compelling, almost confidential tone. The screen shows an open question against a dark backdrop. So we are left with the echoes, the haunting questions that history books often leave behind. Was Buffalo Hump's vengeance justified, a necessary response to an unforgivable act? Or was it a cycle of violence that only guaranteed more suffering? Did the Republic's betrayal in San Antonio make the terror that followed inevitable? Final, lingering shot returns to the portrait of Buffalo Hump. His expression is inscrutable, a man forever defined by this moment. Narrator, final line delivered with quiet gravity. The raid ended, but the reckoning echoes still. In the silence, superpose a final, provocative text card in elegant, clean font. This is the comment sparker. What do you think? Was it justice or was it revenge? Let us know in the comments below.